Hi everyone, comic book reviewer here. This time reviewing on issue 1 of Ultimate Hawkeye. Now, as you know, Ultimate Hawkeye is maybe another line in the new Ultimate series that is obviously going to be coming to a quick and slow end. Which, my best thoughts with the newer Ultimate stuff is that some of it did felt rushed, some of it had good ideas, but a lot of it felt like it was just kind of rushing a product without taking proper time. So one of the stories that I do want to cover is Ultimate Hawkeye, that is meant to feature the character Charles Ramsley, who is obviously meant to be this universe's take on Hawkeye. So let's get on with the story. It starts off how, in an apartment complex, Ulysses Claw is meant to be checking on the security system, and we kind of see how unknown to him, the new Ultimate Hawkeye is keeping a close sort of match, obviously killing off any other drug and crime lords, and him saying, killing ripping merchants with one of the world's oldest, is that making a joke? So right away we see how Ultimate Hawkeye gets ready to take on Ultimate Ulysses Claw, gets ready to fire his arrow, and with much luck it aims right towards his apartment complex, fires it in a sort of James Bondish style, and takes out his eye, and saying, "Yes, got ya. Nice shot, Hawkeye. Did you say you were going?" "Yeah, Tony. Lose my number for a while. I'm going to a party." And this is him going to a Roxxon event, and this is one of these sort of really shady, more dodgy-like parties, sort of like those Diddy parties that P. Diddy did, and obviously goes in, and of course, right away, there's a lot of immoral things going on down below, and he's obviously trying to find any leads to a senator, but of course ends up getting found way too quickly, suffers a tranquilizer dart, and of course ends up kind of suffering from the effects, but because of him being badly drugged, he ends up collapsing, and of course wakes up in a sort of underground dungeon with a voice saying, "Welcome, Hawkeye. Tonight you will be your trial and tribulations brought out by your actions and alliance." So, you knew who I was? So, of course, has to go through a Saul-like game, has to go through every test, trial and struggle, and obviously, because of it, much like Saul, has to kind of figure out the game quickly before ending up getting hurt. So obviously chooses the hammer over an eraser, and has to kind of risk damaging his hand and gets his gear back, and has to go through another trial, which obviously Ultimate Hawkeye thinks quickly and uses his bow and arrow to damage through one of these sort of trials and gets through despite busting up his hand. And after testing out the sort of colouring system, we kind of see how he has to analyse the sort of riddle, and has to think through fast before dealing with dangerous android-like beings. And right away uses his sort of surroundings, fires the arrow at one of the androids, picks the right colour, red, and goes down to a leap of faith. And here he ends up going into a sort of deathmatch battle, and we kind of see how the announcer shows off their sort of contribution, who's obviously meant to be Ultimate Ronin. And right away we see how it's basically Ultimate Hawkeye versus Ultimate Ronin, and it makes it clear that Ultimate Hawkeye has to kind of stay in the fight, because if he loses, his family members get killed off, but if he wins, they stay alive. So obviously has to deal with the situation properly, and Ultimate Ronin saying, "You're not worthy of the Hawkeye mantle, Charles Ramsley, and I'm about to take it from you one shaft at a time. Not sure I like that sound of that, pal. And we see how it's basically swords versus arrows, and of course, right away we see how Ultimate Hawkeye gets badly slashed. We kind of see how Ultimate Ronin gets the upper hand, but due to Ultimate Hawkeye's quick thinking, he ends up blinding Ultimate Ronin, and right away it turns out Ultimate Ronin is meant to be Clint, the original Hawkeye, and because of his failure, ends up getting turned into gold, much to Ultimate Hawkeye's dismay. As you could tell right away, he didn't want any of this to happen to Clint. So we kind of see how after his failure and all that, he ends up kind of seeing the letter and so forth, but decides to kind of head back to see his family, try to process everything going on, and obviously having to kind of keep Clint's legacy alive. And this is the story. So I think, in my opinion, issue 1 is okay, but of course, it does feel like the original intention was to do a proper Hawkeye series. But I don't think Charles Ramsley's a bad choice. I think what they could have done was made him like the Speedy to sort of Hawkeye's Green Arrow. I think there is an idea to go with a sort of Speedy like protege with Charles Ramsley. I feel like obviously the female Hawkeye that you do have from the comics is obviously meant to be a bit like Red Aloe, like Emiko, or a bit like a kind of more, or a bit like other previous female archers that Green Arrow had. I would love to see a sort of Speedy-like companion for Hawkeye. So I think the series still deserves thumbs in the middle. It's okay, not the best, but it's got its redeemable moments. So, comic book reviewer here, signing out.